All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Francis from Fujifilm. And in this live session, we will be talking about the latest two medium format cameras from Fujifilm on the GFX lineup. So this is the GFX 50R and the GFX 100. Now, we understand that in these times, it's kind of hard for you guys maybe to go to a store to look up a camera and have a hands-on experience with it and have a good look at it. So in this video, we won't go into deep in terms of specs and features of the cameras. We are really going to walk around the camera and let you have a look at the camera from different angles and the different buttons as well. So in this live session, we do have two cameras to cover, so we'll get right into it. So we'll quickly go around the GFX 50R. So let's get to the top angle and then put myself in the corner there. And we seem to be in focus. So this is the GFX 50R. So a pretty compact medium format camera, if you ask me, and then paired with this GF 50mm lens on it, you can see like it's really not that big and makes for a really great camera to kind of carry with you if you go on photo walks, but also, you know, this is a medium format camera, so to work in the studio as well. So very nice camera, light and compact. So let's go and take a look at the front of the camera and get to the main feature. So let's remove this lens and try to get that nice glow onto the sensor. So as I said before, this is a medium format sensor, being the GFX 50R. This is a 50 megapixel sensor. It has 425 autofocusing points. This is contrast detection. And yeah, really it's going to deliver incredible image quality in such a small camera. Now, just as a comparison, let me just get like an X Pro 3. So yes, it's bigger, but not by much, considering that this is APS-C and this is medium format. So 50 megapixel sensor, medium format. Now looking at the front of the camera, we have a custom button right there that we can customize and add a map of function that we like to use often to it. So that's quite handy. We have a lot of customizable button on the GFX 50R. On the top, we have the drive button, which is also customizable, but by default will let you select which mode of shooting you want to do. If you want to do continuous shooting, if you want to do some bracketings, for example, some multiple exposures, or even video. So that's for the drive button. We have, again, another function button right there that we can assign a function to. We have something familiar, which is the shutter speed dial on the top of the camera. So we can select our shutter speeds by full stop. And if we wanted to go in between, we can use the rear command dial to go in between these shutter speeds. Now that's for the shutter speed. Well, just for the sake of mentioning it, if you want to change your aperture, you're going to use the aperture ring on the lens itself. Now on the top, we have a command dial. So this will allow you to change your ISO. So by rotating it just like that. In the middle, we have our shutter button. Next to it is our tiny on and off button right there. And then we have our exposure compensation dial if we want to shoot in, like I like to shoot in aperture priority, for example. We select the aperture of the lens, and then the camera will decide on the shutter speed. And by using the exposure compensation dial, I can either brighten up my frame or darken it down. And then we also have a C position that can allow us to go up 5 or minus 5 stops in terms of exposure compensation. We have our hot shoe there. So if you want to use a flash transmitter or an external flash directly onto the hot shoe, it's right there. Now, let's take a look at the bottom of the camera. So we have our ports here. So we have a USB-C port that we can use to charge the battery or to shoot tethered. And then we also have a DC in 15 volt. If we work in a studio, let's say doing product shots, and we don't want to worry about battery life, we can just plug in the optional AC 15 volt into the camera, and then we'll have unlimited power. Here we have the battery door. So we have our NPT125 battery that will go in there. We can close it like that. Now, looking at the back of the camera, we have our rear command dial. We have 2 function buttons, again, that we can assign functions to. Another one here. And then we have our Q button that will allow us to access the quick menu to change various settings quickly on the camera. We have our 8-way lever, which I really enjoy to move my focus point around, to move around the 425 autofocusing points, so we can move around using the 8-way lever, but we can also use it to navigate the menus and then just going around in the menus and clicking on it to selecting what we want. Now, if we click on it while we're on the live view screen, we can see the AF box is going to light up in green, and then we can rotate the rear command dial and then change the size of our focus point. Next, we have our AF mode selector, so single, continuous, and manual. Next to that, we have our delete button, and then we have our view mode button that will allow us to toggle between the different view options and will basically dictate how the eye sensor will behave whenever we cover it. So if we have it, let's say, to eye sensor, then you know when I put my finger over it, so basically if I bring it up to my eye, I will go from the LCD to the EVF itself. Now, speaking of the EVF, we have a really high resolution EVF, which is 3.69 million dots OLED display. So a really bright and nice resolution EVF for you to frame your shots. And you can also review your images using the EVF. On the side there, we have our diopter adjustment, which is really nicely put because we can lock it. So we set it once by pulling and then setting it, and then we can push it back. And in that way, we can make sure it's not going to be bumped and change along the way. Now, next feature I want to talk about on the 50R, because we have 2 cameras to cover, is this 2-way tilting LCD screen. So this is a pretty nice LCD, which is 3.2 inches, and it has 2.36 million dots. So a high resolution LCD display for you to frame your images, but also review your images. And it's also touchscreen, so you can have some touch functions to it. Whether now I had it on the playback on the swipe up, but you can swipe to the side and get access to the film simulations, for example. Swipe it down, you get your 3D level. And then these functions can also be changed to whatever you desired. And also you can also simply disable the touch functions if you don't like them. So that's going to be it for the GFX 50R, because we do have to get on with the GFX 100. So I hope you enjoyed this little view of the 50R. Let me just, show it to you a little bit from different angles so you can get a good view of it. Again, have this LCD tilting so you can do some waist level shooting. And maybe one last view of the sensor shining. All right. So let's move to the GFX 100. This is an incredible camera. Let me refocus because it's a little bit taller than the 50R. So as the name says, this is the GFX 100. It is a 100 megapixel camera. So while we're at it, in the front of the camera, let's have a look. So we have a built-in vertical grip, which will allow us to shoot vertically. And then we have a shutter button there, as well as exposure compensation. And then basically all the buttons that we can find on the standard grip are replicated on the vertical grip. And then we can also lock it in case of that we're shooting in the standard way and we don't want to accidentally push on the shutter button on this side. So let's get to the front of the camera. So first we have our front command dial. So this will be used to change your ISO settings. So if we look at the top at the e-ink display, if I rotate the front command dial, I will be changing my ISO value. Next, we have a function button that can be assigned again to whatever feature you like to have handy. So in the front, and it's also duplicated at the vertical grip position. Now let's get to the beast. So we have, let me get the glow. The 100 megapixel sensor of the GFX 100. So this has 100 megapixel. It also has 425 phase detection autofocusing points. It can shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second at 420 10-bit internally. And then to top it off, it is also stabilized. So the GFX 100 features in-body image stabilization. And then we can get up to 5.5 stops of stabilization with the in-body image stabilization of the GFX 100. So this is quite incredible. And then let me just put, well, I'll put a lens on it. So I'll put the GF50 in the front. All right, so next we have in the front, we have the AF assist lamp, which will help you focus in lower light situations. And that also doubles as a tally light. So if you are recording videos, you can have it blinking as long as the camera is recording. And when you stop recording, it will shut down. So that's a handy feature, considering that the GFX 100 can actually shoot 4K video. This is incredible. Now, let's get to the top of the camera. We have our on and off switch right here. And then as usual, within it, we have the shutter button. And then right next to it, we have the exposure compensation button. So you will press on it and then you can hold, and then you can rotate the rear command dial or and then the rear command dial to bring up or down your exposure compensation. And that's if you're shooting in aperture priority or shutter speed priority, for example. So right now I have it set so that I need to press to change it. You could have it to simply press once and then rotate the rear command dial and then press again to get out of the exposure compensation mode. Now, as I just click, we have a light on button for the e-ink display there. So I just want to have it open so you can see a little bit better on the screen itself. So this button right here will allow me to toggle between manually choosing my shutter speed with the rear command dial or having it to auto, where it will basically be an aperture priority and choose the shutter speed for me. We have a button right here, so that's to toggle between the different display options. So by the way, this screen here, the information you see there, it can be customized to your liking. So you can choose which settings you decide to see on this LCD there. And this is an e-ink display, so it's very low in terms of power consumption. So even when I turn on the camera, it does stay on. So the button right here is to toggle between the different modes in terms of the e-ink display. So I can click once and then I have the virtual dials. So I can change my ISO and see a virtual dial changing, and then same thing for the shutter speed. The next mode for the e-ink display is that we can have a live histogram. So if you're the type of person that likes to use the histogram, well, that's one neat feature for you. Personally, I like this display better because I can see a lot of information that I need just by looking down at the camera. Now let's get on the other side of the camera. We have our drive button as well as our still, multi, and movie selector. So we have the stills position right now, and if I click onto the drive button, it will allow me to choose whether I want to shoot a single image, a low speed burst, or a high speed burst. If I move it to multi, this is where I get my options by pressing on the drive button for the different bracketing options. So I have the ISO bracketing, film simulation, focus bracketing, as well as multiple exposure. And then lastly, we do have the movie position on this dial, which will bring us to the movie mode. And then if we press on the drive button, we can choose our movie mode. So the resolution of the video we're gonna capture. So we can do DCI 4K if we wanted, up to 29.97, so 30 frames per second. And then we can shoot up to 400 megabits in terms of bit rate. So that's quite incredible. So that's for the still, multi, and movie dial. Now let's get to the EVF, which is quite impressive. So we have a 5.76 million dot EVF. So that's really incredible in terms of resolution for an EVF. So when you shoot, let's say in the studio or whatever you're shooting, really, you have this really nice and detailed EVF, which that's quite incredible. And the nice thing about it is that you can actually remove it if you wanted. So if you are the type that likes to shoot with the LCD only, you could remove the EVF and have somewhat of a lighter camera by removing the EVF. Now, by removing the EVF, while we have a hot shoe, so the hot shoe is still usable if we want to put a trigger onto the camera, a flash trigger, or an external flash, still works, but this opens up the option for using this tilt adapter. So I can just slide it on and then slide the EVF onto the adapter. And then now I can swivel the EVF. So it's really nice if you are going to shoot vertically and you want to have the camera like this, and you can just use it like that. What you can also do, well, you can lock it in position. So if you don't want it to swivel, you can also bring it up like that. And then that way you can shoot this way. So that's a neat accessory. Hopefully you could see, but yeah. So that's with the tilt adapter. So let me just take it away. That's the tilt adapter. Let's put the EVF back on it. And then just like the 50R, we have a diopter adjustment knob here that you pull and then you adjust it. And then once it's into place, you push it back in. That way you won't bump it and need to readjust the diopter. And then just like the 50R, we have our view mode button, which we can toggle through the different view mode settings. Now let's get to the back of the camera. So let me just remove the lens for that. I don't want to just lean on the lens. So on the back of the camera, we do have our rear command dial that I showed you before that I use to change the shutter speed of the camera. We have our AF mode selector, so single, continuous, and manual. On this side, we have the delete button. And then here is where we have a lot of buttons. And the nice thing is that they're duplicated, like I said before, to be used when we use the camera on the vertical orientation. So we have our AF on button for anyone that likes to do back button focusing. That's there. We have a function button as well as a Q button to access the quick menu of the camera, change settings right in there in the quick menu. And this is also duplicated onto the vertical grip. And then we have our 8-way lever that I said before, I really like to move my focus point around, that we can use the rear command dial to actually go through the different sizes of AF point. AEL button, that's also a function button. So the AF on and AEL button are duplicated onto the grip and can also be changed to a different function as well. Now we have the menu OK button, display back and playback, which are pretty self-explanatory. Sorry, I need to. All right. So on the back, we have our LCD screen. So this is a tilting touch screen, and this is a three-way. So we can, move it in different directions. Let me give you a better view of it. So down and up, and then we can also move it to the side. And the reason it moves to the side like this, I've seen people often ask me, why would you want that? Well, to me, it seemed pretty simple. Is the fact that if you shoot with the LCD on the vertical orientation and you want to use the LCD to frame your picture, that's much easier like this than to have it like that. So the LCD on the back is, again, touchscreen, as I said, so you can have the touch functions as well. Now it's disabled on this camera, but we can go into the menu and reactivate them and assign different functions as we like. Sorry. So the touch, the LCD on the back is 3.2 inches, and the resolution, just like the 50R, is 2.36 million dots. So again, very nice LCD that gives us a lot of resolution, and then we can review the images and use the touchscreen to swipe between the images, double tap on them, and then to go into 100%, for example. Below that, we do have a sub monitor, which is quite a nice feature as well. If you want to have a clean LCD, so I'm just going to press on the display back button. Now I have a clear view of to frame, and then all the information that would be displayed there can actually be showed on this sub monitor right here. Now we could change the number of settings we see on this screen, and we can also have it to display a histogram on it as well. Now time is running. Let's get to the side of the camera. So we have dual card slots, SD card slots, both UHS 2. Underneath that, we have a 2.5 millimeter, if I can get to it, 2.5 millimeter remote port. So if you wanted to remotely trigger the camera using a cable release. Now on this side of the camera, we have a PC sync for older flashes. So right here, screwing it back. On the first door, we have our 3.5 millimeter microphone input, as well as a 3.5 millimeter headphone input. So again, this camera can shoot 4K video up to 30 frames per second, 420 10-bit internally. So having these ports is a really nice thing. Now onto the next door, we have our USB-C port, which can be used to charge the batteries inside the camera. It can be used to tether as well. And even if you wanted, you could use the GFX 100 as a webcam to get some really creamy bokeh for your video conferencing calls. So the GFX 100 can also be powered via a battery bank that's PD compatible. So if you have a big battery like this, you can plug in USB-C to USB-C, and you will be able to power the camera. So if you're doing time lapses, or if you're doing shooting movies with it and you want a really long battery life, you could use one of these battery packs that are PD compatible. Now the next port, we have a micro HDMI port. So this can be used to view your images on your TV or play back your videos on the TV, the old school way if you wanted. But this will allow you to use an external recorder if you wanted to record videos and have a clean, uncompressed signal at 4K, 30 frames per second, 422 10-bit. So through that micro HDMI port, you can get insane image quality by using an external recorder. Next, we have a DC-N 15 volts. Again, if you're shooting in the studio for a long time and you don't want to have to worry about battery life, you could use the optional AC 15V and plug it into the wall and not have to worry about batteries. Now, speaking about batteries, we have on the side the battery tray, which contains two NPT 125 batteries. So if you plug in, like I said, the camera through the USB-C port, you can charge both batteries at the same time inside the camera. So that's about it for the overview around the GFX 100. Now I can give you a quick look with different lenses. So one of my favorite would be the 110, the Gf110 F2. So that's how it would look like with the Gf110 F2. It barely fits in the frame. So this lens will give you super sharp images and incredibly smooth and shallow depth of field. So that's how it would look like with the 110 F2. And then you saw with the 50 mil. Now let's have a quick look with the GF 63 millimeter, which will give you roughly a 50 millimeter equivalent. Now, I forgot to mention the 110 on the GFX will give you somewhat of a 85 kind of field of view with the GF 110 mil. So this is how it looks like with the GF 63 mil lens. Now, before we go, because time is flying by, I do want to show you some optional accessories. So as I showed before, we have the tilt adapter, the EVF tilt adapter, EVF TL1. So that's to put in between the camera and the EVF, so you can swivel the the EVF and also bring it up like that. Next, we have, I mentioned the AC 15 volt. So if you want to plug in the camera into the wall, if you're shooting products, for example, in a studio and you don't want to have to worry about battery life, this is a really good option that you can get for the GFX system. And then the last accessory would be this nice, let me refocus quickly, 4x5 G adapter. So you can mount the GFX camera onto a 4x5 camera, and then you can move it as well to reframe. And then you can also turn it vertically or horizontally. So these are some of the accessories for the GFX system. Now let me clean up my desk and get back to you. So I hope you enjoyed this live GFX hands-on with the 50R and the 50S. Thank you for joining in today at ProFusion. And if you have any more questions about the GFX system, whether it's the 50S, the 50R, the 100, or if you're looking to buy one and you have some questions or anything related to Fujifilm cameras, if you're looking to buy one or you already own one, you can schedule a tech time with one of the product specialists at Fujifilm. So we'll have a 30-minute time period booked with you to answer any of your questions. So again, since we can't see each other in these days, so that's a service we've put up to help you with deciding which camera you want to purchase, which lens, or if you have any questions about Fujifilm cameras. So I want to say thank you to Vistek for hosting this ProFusion this year, which is virtual. And I hope this was useful. And that was Francis for Fujifilm. I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you for joining in.